I'm Michael Jackson. I'm of Planner 3, the new title, and I handle bicycle and pedestrian affairs, kind of like the lead person for the Prince George's County Planning Department. And Jesse, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessie Cohn McGowan. I'm a transportation planner over at Montgomery County at the planning department over there. So kind of the partner or sister agency to Prince George's Planning.
Thank you. Crystal, would you care to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Crystal Saunders Hancock, and I am also a part of the Prince George's County Planning Department. I am currently serving as the project lead for the Master Plan of Transportation. So welcome, everyone.
And I'll call names as I see them. I see an Elliot on the line. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, folks. I'm Elliot Caldwell. I'm the new Virginia DC coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. I work a lot with our colleague Daniel Pascal, who's actually the Mid-Atlantic coordinator. He's based in Philly. Maryland falls under his purview, but I happen to live about a mile from the Prince George's County line in DC. So I'm in Hyattsville and Mount Rainier and all over PG County a lot. And so I'm going to be kind of working with him on a lot of the East Coast Greenway issues on the Prince George's County side as we work our way towards Anne Arundel County across the Patuxent.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Elliot. I see Dan is here. Dan, would you care to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dan Barron. I'm a resident of Riverdale Park, Prince George's County. Just happy to join you all. And I also note that tonight is a very popular night for community meetings. So I'm taking some notes for some neighbors and friends who weren't able to.
Oh, okay. Oh, thanks for sharing. Is there anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry, Yuri. Would you care to?
Yeah, sure. I'm Yuri Borowski. I'm also a county resident of 3 years now, and in the 2075 zip code. That's Landover, Largo, Heights, or whatever you want to call it. It's an unincorporated area between Central Avenue and Morgan Boulevard, kind of intersection.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that I've missed? Okay, it looks like we really have an intimate group this evening. Maybe some other folks will join us. Jesse, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you. I'm going to share my screen to talk a little bit about some of the safety or Vision Zero work that we're doing in Montgomery County. So thanks to Michael for inviting me to present tonight, and I feel like a nice thing about an intimate group is that I'm looking forward to your questions, and we can have a discussion after the presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Vision Zero. Some of you may already be familiar with this concept, but just provide a little bit of a background on that. I'll talk about the predictive safety analysis, which has been the focus of my work at the planning department for the past 2 years, and then cover some other tools that we're working on at the planning department that maybe are explicitly safety oriented or are plans or studies related to transportation safety. So what is Vision Zero? Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while working to improve safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. And so you may be aware that in the US, there's about 40,000 traffic deaths a year. And the traditional approach says that some number of traffic deaths are inevitable and takes kind of a really marginal approach to working down that number of traffic fatalities. Whereas Vision Zero says that traffic deaths are preventable and that working towards zero is something that is feasible and should be, our ultimate goal. The traditional approach really requires perfect human behavior. So says, oh, that driver was distracted, or oh, someone was crossing the street, not where there was a crosswalk, or someone was speeding on a road, etc. Whereas Vision Zero says that people make mistakes, and people walk in the places that are most convenient to them. If a road is designed for higher speeds, they're going to be driving higher speeds, etc. So we need to be thinking about how people make mistakes and accommodating that into the way that we plan for safety. The traditional approach looks at preventing collisions, whereas Vision Zero really focuses on fatal and severe crashes. So even if there's a ton of rear ends at a certain intersection, Vision Zero says we should really focus our resources where the most severe crashes are occurring. The next one, number 4, about individual responsibility versus a systems approach, is kind of similar to thinking about human behavior, but it also kind of really says that we need to think about, as designers or planners, what is our role in making a safer transportation system. And so these are some of the suburban safety challenges that we've really identified for Montgomery County, but I imagine many of these ring true in Prince George's County as well. So the county is made up of a variety of different kind of urban or suburban nodes or activity centers, but to get between them, you often have to travel on pretty fast roads with high traffic volumes. We also see that on our major arterials, crosswalks are often infrequently spaced, or the number of signalized intersections are infrequently spaced. And so say, you catch the bus right in front of your house on your way to work. Well, on the way home, it's on the other side of the street, and getting to the nearest crosswalk may be 10 minutes out of your way. And that's not something that people are likely to do. They're likely to cross where is most convenient for them. We've also seen, primarily on these major arterials, inadequate walking and biking infrastructure. So a priority for the county is, improving the number of sidewalks and crosswalks and bike lanes, et cetera. And then lastly, given a lot of our development has occurred in a post-war era, and that, we don't really have a grid network in the majority of the county, we really have land uses that encourage speed. We don't have always buildings kind of up close to the road. And so kind of the history of sprawl and more traditional single family development or suburban development really encourages people to drive faster, and speed is often associated with more severe traffic crashes. So to now pivot to what we're doing about these suburban safety challenges. There's links at the bottom of the screen for each of the projects that I'll talk about. I can also put them in the chat later if you're interested. So a main project that I've been working on is the predictive safety analysis. Ideally, we wouldn't have to wait for someone to be severely injured or killed for us to improve conditions on our roadways. And so this project is estimating the expected number of crashes at intersections and segments for 6 different crash types throughout the county. And we've contracted with the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center on this project, and we're aiming to have completion later this spring. And so I'm going to go into a bit of detail about how we did this work. It's a little bit wonky, but bringing you all along for the ride on how we did this project. So these are the key steps, but I'll go into each in detail on the coming slides. So in order to understand where crashes occur, it was really important for us to get a holistic look at the data. So what is the context data when it comes to transportation, to land use, and to demographics? So we built a really extensive database with over 200 variables that look at things like speed limit and number of lanes and other characteristics of the roadway. But then we also added in kind of density of different land uses. So is this intersection close to a park or a hospital? Is it close to a liquor store or a bar? Is it close to a school, et cetera? And then we also looked at demographic attributes, looking at equity focus areas, which is kind of an equity measure that Montgomery County has put together that's similar to the equity emphasis areas that have been put together by the regional agency, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And then we also looked at income distribution and race and ethnicity. And so while that data is really important, one piece of data that's missing is how many people are actually walking, biking, and driving on our roads. And so that's often referred to as exposure. So we wanted to understand how many people are traveling on our roads, because that tends to be a predictor of how many crashes, right? Like if there's no cars on the road, there's likely no crashes. And so we compiled counts from throughout the county, from development projects, from working with the Department of Transportation and the state. And what we did was we developed a model. So while we had counts at, say, 600 intersections, there's over 16,000 intersections in the county. And so what we were able to do was develop a model based on some of those data points that I showed you on the previous slide to estimate pedestrian, bicycle, and cycling activity countywide. And so all of this ultimately is going to feed into our estimation model. The next step that we had was we identified key crash types. And so we didn't just want to model how many pedestrian crashes are likely to occur at a given intersection, because there's a lot of different ways to reduce pedestrian crashes. And so we wanted to kind of narrow in on more specific crash types so that we were kind of balancing both capturing a large number of crashes, but also identifying crash types that had clear, specific safety improvements that could be implemented. So if we just said, where do all crashes occur, regardless of, say, if it's a bicycle, pedestrian, or motorist, it'd be really hard for us to know how we actually improve that place, even if we've developed a good model for understanding how many crashes happen. And so we ultimately identified 6 crash types as part of this project. We looked at pedestrian crashes after dark at intersections, pedestrian crashes along segments where a vehicle's going straight. This is often someone crossing mid-block. We looked at bicycle crashes at intersections, left turn injury crashes at intersections, and this was for all modes. So bicyclists, pedestrians, or motorists involved in a left turn crash. We also looked at motor vehicle straight or angle crashes at intersections. It's kind of like a T-bone crash. And then lastly, we looked at single vehicle crashes, which tend to be more common in rural areas. They're often sometimes called run off the road crashes. And so our next step here was to develop safety performance functions, and that's kind of a wonky term, but essentially what it is an equation that estimates the number of crashes at that intersection. And so the way that these are made up is kind of like a linear regression, if you're familiar with that. So we estimated the annual number of pedestrian crashes at an intersection, by having some coefficient times the number of daily pedestrians, another coefficient times the number of daily vehicles, etc. And so this is just an illustrative example, but I can show you one that we did develop as part of this project. So one example we had was pedestrian segment crashes with vehicles going straight. Again, this is kind of people who are crossing mid-block. And so we found, unsurprisingly, that pedestrian crashes are associated with pedestrian volumes. Places with more people walking have more pedestrian crashes, but also places that have more drivers have more vehicle crashes. And a lot of the findings here are probably not surprising to you as like a layperson or as a planner for those folks on the call. And, they're not surprising to me, but it is helpful to have data to back up why we're seeing what we're seeing. And so we found with roadway infrastructure where there's a longer segment, we're more likely to have crashes, whereas on a dead end, you're less likely to have crashes. That makes sense. People on a dead end are maybe driving slower, or there's fewer vehicles. Yuri, I see that you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
I do, and I don't want to trip your pace because you're having such a good pace, but
No, you're
making
good. Go ahead.
Just of a small group. I don't understand the income crashes. That's kind of an eye opener for me. I get the dead end and everything, but just that's the one that I hope you can speak to it in great length.
Yeah, sure. And I don't know that I always have the answer for why that's the case, but I'll kind of walk through these and mention income as well. So we did see areas with parking lots are associated with more pedestrian crashes. And we did see that the number of marked crosswalks is associated with more crashes. And I think this is one of the challenges with the project that we did is that, right, you put a crosswalk in a place that you think people are going to walk. But by channelizing all the pedestrians in that location, it could also result in, more crashes as well. So to your point about demographics, we saw that population density was associated with more crashes, but for income, it was associated with fewer. But here, actually, I think the variable was like the percent of households making over $150,000. We tested a lot of different income-related variables, but what we actually found here was like the very wealthy areas have fewer crashes. So it wasn't necessarily that low-income areas have more crashes, but it was like the very wealthy areas, something is different about them. Maybe the pedestrian infrastructure is better in them and that didn't show up in the model elsewhere. Maybe it's that people are driving slower, or just on the whole, really wealthy areas are more likely to be kind of cul-de-sac or kind of more single family home enclaves relative to kind of areas that are more mixed income. So, I don't necessarily have a perfect answer for why that is the case, but I can maybe dig into that variable a bit more, but that's kind of our initial thought on that front. And so once we had all of these equations, kind of the steps that we've been working on most recently is applying these formulas that we've developed across the county. And we've been looking at locations that have high crash estimates. One thing we're also looking at here is where did our model estimate a lot of crashes, but we don't actually have a history of crashes. And so that's something that can say, hey, this location is unsafe, or it's potentially unsafe, but there haven't been crashes in the past. What is unique about this that we might want to think about implementing elsewhere? Or maybe we've seen that the model says that the location is pretty safe, but we actually have seen a high incidence of crashes in that location. That can help us say, you know, one of the variables that's not in the model is really related to safety, and maybe it's kind of the geometry of the intersection. You know, if it's not kind of a parallel or a perpendicular kind of four-way intersection, those askew angles could be something that impacts safety, but is not something that we were able to measure as part of our project. And so the last step is ultimately going to be identifying, like, what are the safety improvements that we can put in place that are associated with these types of crashes. And so this is what we're really working on now. And we're going to have a few different scenarios in how we think of this. So some might be, what are the low cost improvements that maybe we can do countywide, and what would the impact of that be on safety, versus, you know, maybe there's a few intersections or segments that are really a major issue or a hot spot, and we could do a few very expensive capital projects on those areas and improve safety. Because I think ultimately we want to think about what's the right investment strategy for the county, and how can we measure the safety impact of those different investment strategies. And so just because you also mentioned income, I think a third strategy that we're looking into is one specifically related to equity. So kind of what's the thinking, the first is, you know, what are the low cost improvements? The second is, what are the hot spots where we could invest a lot of money? And the third is, you know, if equity is really a priority for the county, where should we be spending our money, and what does that result in from a safety or crash reduction perspective? And so some of the initial findings that we've had so far is that what we've done is we've really pulled out the top 200 intersections or segments for each of these crash types. And so instead of saying, you know, let's look at the number one the number one intersection or the number two intersection, we know that with 16,000 intersections, you know, 1 versus 2 versus 10 is probably not very meaningful. So we've really just pulled out the top 200 as part of our focus area. And so in Montgomery County, we have bicycle and pedestrian priority areas. We call them BIPAs. The state also has a BIPA program that's slightly different, but you may have BIPAs in Prince George's County as well. And so we found that over 100 of the top 200 intersections for pedestrian intersection crashes after dark are in BIPAs. And so that's helpful for us to better understand, you know, lighting may not be the way that we usually think about pedestrian safety in our bicycle and pedestrian priority areas, but maybe it should be. We also found for our equity focus areas that over 140 of the top 200 segments for pedestrian crashes were in these areas. So, you know, we already knew that we had equity challenges that we needed to focus on, but this kind of really helps us narrow in on some of those top crash locations that are in areas that tend to be more diverse or more low income. And so in Montgomery County, an equity focus area is defined as being low income. I can send you a link that goes into more detail about it, but it is a mix of communities that are low income, have a certain number of people of color relative to the county average, and then have low English proficiency. So it's similar to how the regional body does it, but we've kind of just focused on the county specifically. As part of our development review process, how we evaluate, you know, if someone wants to build new multifamily housing or commercial development, we have transportation policy areas, and these range from the most rural as the green up to yellow, orange, and then red are the most urban. And we found that over 100 of our top 200 intersections for our crash types were in our orange policy areas, which are kind of our dense suburban areas. And that's not that surprising, right? I'm sure you see that in Prince George's County, that, you know, not your urban nodes, but the areas that are maybe connecting your urban nodes or have some density can be an issue for crashes. Montgomery County also released a Complete Streets Design Guide in recent years, where we identified different crash types, including boulevards, county connectors, arterials, etc. And so we also found that boulevards are where we're seeing a lot of our crashes. 100 of the top 200 for 3 crash types are along boulevards. And then lastly, we've also seen an issue with bicycle crashes along some of our parkways. So you may be familiar, in Montgomery County, we have Beach Drive, Sligo Creek Parkway, Little Falls Parkway, some of these roadways that run through our parks that are really popular for biking and walking. Many of them have trails alongside them. And we found that bicycle intersection crashes are really an issue along these roadways. And so, you know, thinking about how, when the trail stops at the intersection and picks up at the other side, what are we doing to ensure that the bicyclists can get safely through that intersection? So that was a lot of information about this one project that we're working on, but we're hoping that this will really inform the investment decisions we make in the future when it comes to safety. I'm going to talk briefly about a few other projects really quickly, and after the presentation, I can put some links in the chat. But we did develop a Vision Zero community toolkit finalized last year that includes over 40 safety treatments that are kind of proven to reduce speeds, provide safer crossings, increase visibility, separate modes, so kind of providing dedicated space for bicyclists and pedestrians, and improve rural road safety. And so this is about a 100-page document, and each document has kind of a 2-page spread, as you can see in this example. So these are high visibility crosswalks that have markings across them, either kind of as a zebra on a diagonal or kind of as a ladder across. And so each of these 40 treatments have a 2-page spread that talks about where they're most suited, how much they cost, what you need to think about if this is something that you're implementing. And so here's just a list of all of the treatments that we included. And at the planning department, we're kind of aiming to develop tools that residents can use to identify either problems or solutions within their communities. So, Prince George's County is a really large place. Montgomery County is really large. And so, while we are, as planners and engineers, trying to address all of the issues, it's also sometimes helpful to hear from you all what you think the problems or solutions are. And so we're kind of trying to work to provide more information to members of the public. So I see, Annika,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm wondering about, you had the curb cutouts,
Mhm.
bulges, I think, marked. Those have always confused me on the bike plans because they're terrifying on a bicycle, because you're on a shoulder and all of a sudden you get pushed into traffic,
Mhm.
which is not expecting you. And then you have to go back into the shoulder again. And I'm really confused that those are put on bike plans because I hate them when I'm biking.
Yeah, so bulb outs tend to be more of a pedestrian safety improvement, but you're right that we need to be thinking about, how does this pedestrian and safety improvement impact the bicyclists? And so I think ideally some of the places where these are included, there's either a dedicated bike lane or, it's safe for you to bike, not diverting into the shoulder, but kind of more along the line, of the roadway. But I do understand what you're saying, that it can make for like a less efficient travel for a bicyclist. From a pedestrian perspective, it's intended to improve visibility and shorten the distance that the pedestrian has to cross across the street. Elliot, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I guess kind of a macro question about all the different sort of intersections or areas, crash concerned areas. If they're on, how does Montgomery County approach that if it's on the state network, not the local network, in terms of whose right of way it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is on the state's network. And I can't speak exactly to how that works from an implementation perspective. From a planning perspective, we tend to kind of look countywide, regardless of whether or not it's a state road or a county road. I know that there are some instances in which we, are the ones making improvements on the state road, but we do need to kind of be in line with what's best practices for the state. And that's often less progressive than what is best practices for the county. And so we definitely work closely with the state on some of those issues. But I can refer you to someone at the Montgomery County Department of Transportation. I know less about the implementation perspective. And I think maybe, yeah, there was just another comment in the chat. Oh, Melissa. Oh yeah, I think I'm about to talk about this mapping tool. So we did create an interactive crash map last year as well. So Melissa just mentioned it in the chat. And so this depicts crashes between 2015 and 2020. And actually can just open it up for you all while we're here. Why don't we do that? 1 second. And so one of the nice things about this is as you pan to different parts of the county, the summary statistics on the map update. And so let me just show you. So this is like downtown Silver Spring, and the crashes that are black have, no injury or fatality. The ones that are in purple are a severe injury, and the red are fatalities. And then the color of the shape represents whether it's a bicyclist, a pedestrian, or a motorist. But one of the things I think is really effective about this map is that if you zoom out, the summary statistics on the side change. Or so say, you know, we want to really zoom into this intersection. You can see that there were no injuries. You know, it was mostly vehicle crashes, and then the crash type is broken out as well. Another nice thing about this map is that you can filter whether or not you want to see just fatal crashes. That'll take everything off but the fatal, and again, the right side will update. You could say I'm only interested in pedestrian crashes, and it'll update again. And then you can also select crashes. So say you're really interested in this one roadway, you can say, I want to select pedestrian crashes on this road, and you can draw a rectangle. That's not a perfect rectangle, you know, but you can draw a polygon or a rectangle around that road and select that. And then you can really, if you want to download the data and look at it in Excel, if you want to bring it into a mapping software, if that's something you have access to, it's kind of really a great tool both for planners and engineers as well as for the public to kind of better understand the conditions. And so I see you have a comment on kind of open data. So this data, we've downloaded it from Montgomery County's Vision Zero database, but I assume that is linked to the state's database. We have done some data cleaning about where these crashes are actually located. So often the crash location is based on where the crash report was filed, but sometimes you see a hotspot around the police station because, you know, at the end of the police officer's shift, he's filling out all these crash reports. And so we've done some cleaning of the data created by the state and the county to kind of better align with where we think the crashes actually occurred. So another project I'm going to briefly talk about is what we call the growth and infrastructure policy. So this is how development is approved in Montgomery County. So if you want to, again, build an apartment building or a supermarket, you need to see what your impact is on the surrounding area. And so in addition to saying, you know, will this development cause traffic at a nearby intersection, you also have to look at the bicycle and pedestrian environment around the area to see whether or not pedestrian or bicycle improvements are needed. There's also now a Vision Zero statement as part of this effort to kind of see if there's high injury locations, proximate safety issues, maybe speeding issues, or site access issues. And so this is a way that we're really trying to just institutionalize Vision Zero into each of the things that we're working on. I also mentioned briefly previously that we've completed a complete streets design guide. What this does is it identifies a street type for all the streets in the county and then says, ideally, this street type would have, you know, a 35-mile-an-hour speed and would have 2 vehicle lanes that are 10 feet wide, et cetera. And so this doesn't necessarily reflect what is on the ground today, but as we're building new projects or as developers are making improvements to the roadway network, you know, we can ensure that we're ultimately getting the type of improvements that we want to see. So maybe in a downtown, we want a wider sidewalk width because there's more pedestrian activity, whereas we don't need that kind of on a more rural street. This is a design guide that helps us really kind of standardize our approach across the county. Annika, is your hand up for a new question?
Yeah, for some of the complete street stuff, like I've noticed a lot of new things come up, and the whatever counts as like acceptable for bikes ends up being like a really tiny shoulder, or like you drew a bicycle in the middle of the street and are calling it a bike lane. And I have little kids and I would never go on these roads with them. And so I'm wondering if there's any kind of push to just make these big separated bike paths. Because right now I'm on Falls Road in Montgomery County, and we have that huge bike path, which is amazing. Like that's something you can take a whole family on. And I wonder why we're not supporting that for all the new developments.
I think we are supporting separated bikeways in a variety of locations, and we do have a bicycle master plan. I don't know if you've seen it, but we also understand that not every road is going to need a wide separated bikeway. And so I don't know specifically kind of the roads that you're concerned about, but you know, we do understand that not every cyclist is comfortable in, you know, just a striped bike lane on the side of the road. And so working to improve that, but we obviously have a long way to go. I think our bicycle master plan has, hundreds of miles of improvements that we'd like to see. And so while we're chipping away, it's going to be a while to get there.
Yeah, I'm thinking of in PG County. So there's where the new purple line is near the university, 193 coming up from Langley Park. And I saw recently there's some kind of bike plan that mostly just involved sort of bicycles on the road. And that's such a busy road. Like it's one of those scary giant boulevards. And so I guess I'm worried that we're going to draw a bicycle on the sidewalk and call it good, because then I would not be able to get, like nobody would be able to get there safely to the metro with children.
Hi,
if
Annika.
that's the solution.
Hi, this is Michael Jackson. Let me let me add a couple of comments to that. We certainly recognize the fact that cyclists have different levels of skill and comfort, and there's probably not too many places where I wouldn't ride personally, but I can certainly appreciate people who are not as comfortable with traffic, or with your mother, you got small children, and you have certainly legitimate worries about that. So I know Montgomery County has had a policy of dual mode facilities, and some of our communities also, such as I believe Brandywine, in their area master plan, they call for dual mode facilities with a side path like Falls Road and bike lanes on there, to try to reach the greatest number of cyclists. With University Boulevard in Langley Park and Adelphi, one of the dilemmas is that you have a lot of businesses and major activity centers on those roadways where cyclists would need to eventually get to shopping, etc. But it's also important to look at all the alternatives that parallel University Boulevard. And I used to live in Tacoma Park as a student and would study often at the 24-hour room at the University of Maryland. And I was able to come up with, and I didn't have a car at the time, so I was able to come up with a bike route that was kind of zigzaggy, but it does parallel University Boulevard. And it worked out pretty well for me, and I would love to be able to get that implemented from Bethesda to the University of Maryland on lower volume streets. So it is a dilemma when you're dealing with a built environment already. How do you retrofit this to accommodate all users, kind of like the 880 program, where streets should be comfortable for 8-year-olds as well as 80-year-olds. So thanks for the comments.
Great. And I just have, I think, a few more slides, so I'll wrap up. The county is currently working on a pedestrian master plan. So we completed our bike plan a few years ago and are similarly putting together a pedestrian master plan. This includes a map that outlines the pedestrian level of comfort. So kind of similar, I think, to some of what Annika was saying. Some roads, even if they have a bike lane, are not that comfortable for people, for the average person out riding. And so in addition to just saying where are there sidewalks, we also wanted to look at where is it comfortable to walk. So we know that a sidewalk next to a 40-mile-an-hour road is not going to be as comfortable as a sidewalk with a big buffer next to, a 30-mile-an-hour road. So we're thinking about that in our comfort analysis. We've also developed a pedestrian audit toolkit, which is like a set of tools that can help you evaluate the pedestrian environment in your community. So while this was developed for Montgomery County, it's a pretty general approach. So if you wanted to use this in Prince George's County, I'm sure it would be applicable. And then as part of this project, we're developing project prioritization, policies, practices, etc. And it'll be wrapping up next spring. And then lastly, I'll just mention that we're working on an access management study. So access management is all kind of about how you enter and exit, different sorts of development. So for example, on the left here, the before, we see that, say this is a commercial development, say it's like a mall or a strip mall. And, it seems like every tenant at the strip mall has its own driveway, right? There's 3 driveways. It's got to cross the sidewalk. It crosses the bike lane, and people can make lefts into it. They can make rights in and out of it, etc. Access management is thinking about, well, how do we manage that access? How do we make it safer and more efficient? And so the example on the right has gotten rid of 2 of those driveways, and it just permits a right in, right out situation. So you're not having cars that are crossing a whole bunch of lanes, and you've reduced the number of conflict points. And so what we're doing here is identifying different strategies to improve access management, thinking about safety as well as kind of the complete streets design framework. So what access management tools are needed in different contexts throughout the county. And this is kind of currently underway and will be completed in late spring of this year. And so I know that I walked through a lot of content, and I appreciate your questions along the way, but I'm happy to answer additional questions if there's anything else you want to talk about. So thanks so much for your time. Annika, I see you put your hand up.
Yeah, I guess Elliot had mentioned it earlier with how you're interacting with state roads. So I own a house on Adelphi Road, right at Cool Spring Road. And I had tried, and it's terrifying to like run across the 5-lane state highway to get to the university, even though it's just half a mile away. And I had contacted someone from PG County and tried to get just I think it was 50 feet of sidewalk that would get us to the intersection. And he was kind of saying from the county, it would be fine. We could do this, but it's at a state road. And then there's a whole nother thing. And it felt like everything just got bogged down so much once you hit a state road. And I guess I was hoping, kind of like Elliot mentioned, that there's just a plan to get through that roadblock, because it seemed like it was just frustrating because it seemed like we were so close to being
I don't
able
know,
to cross
Michael
that road.
or Crystal, if you want to kind of comment on how Prince George's works with the state.
I'll take that on. Annika, I am a former I'm a retired MDOT employee, Maryland Department of Transportation. I was the state's director of bicycle and pedestrian access for nearly 15 years. And so I can speak from the perspective of how the state does work with local jurisdictions along there. We, SHA has, State Highway Administration has a complete streets policy. And over the years, the state has become very sensitive to the needs of pedestrians and bicyclists. It's kind of like a real different perspective now than it was in 2000 when I joined the state. I will say that we have a gentleman, Peter Campanides, who is the assistant district engineer for District 3. And we also have an Adelphi University of Maryland Purple Line area master plan that will be taking all those factors into consideration. It is a little bit of a bureaucratic, an additional bureaucratic hurdle of getting permission from 2 different agencies, but I'll say generally the state is concerned about pedestrians, and they've developed pedestrian priority areas to look at areas of high pedestrian conflicts along there. So don't give up hope, please.
I think my only other follow-up there is kind of, you're saying high pedestrian use areas, and this intersection is not high use because it's super scary, but I think we all would have loved to be able to walk to the university. So I guess I'm a little concerned if it's when you do the count, the people count, and you're like, oh, only 3 people crossed. This is not an important intersection, but it's because it's so scary that nobody is there.
Well, it will be more important once the Purple Line station goes there, since there'll be no parking involved. So there's an opportunity there to actually do something to increase the pedestrian footprint. But you raise a very good point there. That sometimes traffic engineers might say, well, there's not many people going there now, so it's not that important. But I would respond, well, how many people cross a bridge that's not built yet? Yuri.
Well, I'm sorry. If I can just
I'm sorry,
piggyback
Chris.
just a little bit. No worries. Annika, I totally agree with what Michael said, because for so long, State Highway Administration just kind of, and this was like back in the 90s, they kind of ignored pedestrians. So to see that we're having a discussion about bike and ped and state highways, it warms my heart. They're not where they need to be, but we're working on it. So I mean, we're all doing it. Can you tell me the name of the intersection again? Because what I can do is check with the project manager of the Adelphi Road plan to see what improvements are included, or are you aware, have you been involved with the Adelphi Road master plan?
No, I last talked to someone like 3 years ago, but it was so hard because it felt like you had to keep following up, and then I was working and
I
it's just
got it.
hard to
Nope.
keep up with
Gotcha.
it. But it,
No excuse. No worries. What I can do is that I can I can get your information, and once I figure out the right person, I think I know the right person, but I want to make sure it's the right person I can connect you to.
yeah,
If that's okay with you. And what was the intersection again?
it was just Cool Spring Road and Adelphi Road. So
Cold Spring.
the
Okay.
road itself is scary and difficult to fix up, which I understand. But
Mhm.
like, if we can make our way to Cool Spring Road and get to the intersection at 193 safely there, that's already like such a huge improvement.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. I think Shuba is the project manager, but I will go ahead and make sure I can get the right information for you and connect you so she at least knows what's going on. I'm not sure what process at what stage they're in, but at least it can identify what is included or what they're doing, because I don't know what they're doing. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Yuri. I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question for our Montgomery County presenter, but the discussion ran away. That I've been having a deer in the headlights look on my face. So I want to comment on that. I'm just impressed with Annika's activism for her community, because I go to what I call Prince George's Plus, which is that neighborhood along Adelphi Road for a bike ride, because I think that's a kick-ass safe neighborhood to bike comparing with the place I live in. And I'm hearing Annika complaining about that area, and I'm thinking, my standards are very low for Central Avenue and for the state development. And I was just at the beginning of this call praising this paint job that the county did on Morgan Boulevard, where people yell at me, get off the effing road. And I'm like, there's a bike painted. I get to be here. So you're not going to run me over. And I continue pedaling. And I'm like, this is the best thing I've seen done in my neighborhood in 3 years. And I'm very happy with it. And I'm hearing Annika, and I'm like, well, that explains why that neighborhood is Prince George's Plus comparing to my neighborhood. And I guess that's more on the subject of sort of equity, but also Squeaky Will gets the grits and stuff. But I'm just both commend her efforts, but also a little bit envious. Having said that, that just explains my facial expression during the conversations. I want to rope our Montgomery County presenter back into this discussion and ask my question with regards to automated enforcements versus infrastructure investments. I know DC leaned very, very heavy into automated enforcement as a solution. And I looked at your toolkit, which is really cool. And I assume some of those costs and logic also applies to our county just as well. And I see automated enforcement is marked as $3 marks versus, for example, a raised crosswalk is only $2 mark. And in my view, as a motorist, as far as well as a bicyclist, raised crosswalk is a lot better way to slow me down than knowing that there's a camera right there where everyone's going to slow down. I mean, the only time I ever get an automated ticket because I don't know where to slow down, but if it's not cars, we know where all to slow down, and it really does not work. So I guess my question to Montgomery County planning team is, like, what is the current vision on automated enforcement, the philosophy? I know DC is just adding cameras like there's no tomorrow, while Montgomery County has a handful of cameras, and kind of, is that something that the division is to pursue that direction? Just if you could just speak about automated enforcement and really its effectiveness and true cost to the jurisdiction as opposed to the private entity who co-finances and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Like there's 40 treatments in this toolkit. And so I think that, we acknowledge that like no one treatment is going to be the one that, is improve safety everywhere. And so I think we see that there's a time and a place for automated enforcement. In some instances, one of the benefits is that it can be moved around. Oh yeah, I can share my screen again. One sec. One of the benefits is that it can be moved around. And so, you know, I imagine that higher cost is because it's kind of an ongoing operational cost relative to some of these infrastructure investments. That's a one-time capital layout. You know, I think that we've seen in Montgomery County, as we've seen across the country, that there is bias in enforcement, kind of more manual enforcement. And so there has been a push towards more automated enforcement, and that it, you know, you are likely to get the ticket regardless of whether or not you are black or brown or white, you know. And so it has been used as kind of a more equitable approach to enforcement, but it is not, you know, the only solution. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I guess I would just keep in mind that it's like one of the many tools in the toolbox. And I think the county is looking to do a bit more of it, but I can't speak to the details of that.
Thank you. And maybe another quick a state level engagement as well, as far as state routes to put an automated camera on state routes versus county routes. And sort of, I remember reading somewhere that in Maryland, there's a legal limit as to how expensive the ticket can be versus that, because a lot of those factors, where the cameras are placed, what the penalty is, and frankly, how well the public is informed of them and what the volume of traffic, there's so many more variables in that. And I do hear your point on sort of the cameras don't see the race, but the placement of the cameras usually follow the neighborhoods. And I think that actually echoes back to my earlier question on income. And that ultimately penalizes, you know, Black and brown communities even further by, frankly, putting the cameras where the danger is rather than producing a sustainable infrastructure investment. So I guess the question in this reflection is, what is the cooperation with the state, and what is this sort of scale of establishing the penalty, and really how does it really impact the communities of low income where inversely correlates to that crashes?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know the details on that in Montgomery County. So I can try to find the right person to chat with you about that specifically. But you know, we do acknowledge that any sort of penalty is likely to be regressive, and that $50 to, you know, one resident might not be a big deal, and $50 to another resident may be really significant. And you may be aware, I guess, that if you do get tickets from automated enforcement, it doesn't at all affect like the points on your license. So that's just another thing I wanted to note for those who may not be aware. But you know, I think the fact that it moves around is intended to encourage people to drive the speed limit regardless of whether or not they know that there's enforcement. But we also know that many of the roads were designed to be driven faster than what we've marked the speeds as. And so, you know, there's reasons why people drive quickly. And so we're coming at it from a variety of angles. And part of Vision Zero is kind of putting infrastructure and engineering ahead of education and enforcement, but we do also see that there's still a role for education and enforcement in safety.
Thank you.
Annika, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yeah, that's fine.
You have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know for the newer developments, there's always the like that request to have the big sidewalks and everything. So I guess I had two questions. One is there any like focus on just, you know, doing a 2-for-1 and making them those big bike paths? I guess I'm a little confused on how that, like, budget wise would be more expensive than just doing a sidewalk. You kind of do two birds with one stone if you just have them put in the trail when they do that. And I guess it's 3 questions. Maybe I should just do one at a time. So my first one.
Yeah, I defer to someone from Prince George's to maybe speak to kind of how your development process works.
Hi, Crystal, would you like me to take that one?
Yes, please.
So we both do reviews of development plans, and currently I review all development plans or pretty much most of them for ways that we can improve conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists. Specifically, there's a county law that says if there is not bicycle and pedestrian transportation adequacy in a particular community, then the developer has some responsibility to make improvements. Now, there are a number of caveats to that. They depend on where the development is located. It depends on what's already out there, but I don't think I've come to any cases yet in my year and a half of being with the department that there is pretty much adequacy in existing. So there's usually something that we can ask the developers to do. There's a cost limit as to how much we can ask the developers to spend, and that's based upon the number of residential units that are going in and the amount of commercial square, the commercial square footage in a property. So you've got those constraints there. Get into your question about why not combine sidewalks and trails, and that would probably be what we would call a shared use path. Sometimes you don't have the right of way. And well, first of all, we have a master plan of transportation that Crystal will give a little bit of update when she talks, because we're in the process of updating that. So like Montgomery County, we do have a plan that looks at specific areas in the county along roadways and along open space where we want to have bicycle and pedestrian facilities. One of the problems of shared use paths along the side of roadways, if you have a lot of driveways and you have a lot of intersections, those are conflict points. And say you have a shared use path. Well, let's take Falls Road, since you brought that up for an example. Falls Road, they have relatively few intersections along there. They're kind of spaced well, but you can get into an issue when if you're biking, you're on the path, and do you stop at the side streets or do you have the right of way? And sometimes there's confusion there, and there are concerns. I'm not too sure how Montgomery County has looked at, but Jesse, you had mentioned earlier that you saw that there were a number of crashes along some bicycle crashes along some of the park areas. And you mentioned Beach Drive and Sligo Creek, for example, where they have a shared use path paralleling the roadway. So those are also concerns as well. One of the things that have been a big fan of, and I think we don't do enough of, is the educational approach. And while I was with the state, I was able to work with the Rockville Bicycle Advisory Committee at Montgomery College in Rockville to start restart an Introduction to Cycling 101 class, and you got 1 PE credit for attending the class. And I would serve as a guest lecturer every semester, and it went on for about 6 or 7 years, and it was very popular, especially getting adults who never learned how to ride as children and were reluctant. So that's and Jesse had mentioned earlier about, they're also interested in education as well, and I believe enforcement as well as engineering changes. So I find that with myself that, and looking at statistics from back in the day, A lot of times people are worried about getting struck from behind by cars. And while that can be very serious or fatal, they tend to be only a small part of motor vehicle bike collisions. Intersections are much more concerning and dangerous. A lot of times people don't have as much concern about intersections as they do getting struck from behind. So I think if we can also increase education and address some of the counterintuitive issues that go along with bike safety, that will help us. What's the term I'm trying to say? Help engineering improvements as well.
So Annika, did that answer your question?
Kind of. Yeah, I think the access point thing that Jesse mentioned earlier really resonated, where you kind of have way too many ways to get in there. Because I think there's the Millennium Trail in Rockville on East Goody has that issue where you just on that one I would actually sometimes not use the path because of that, where you're concerned about getting hit at every single intersection. So that looks amazing, just getting rid of those. Or like if you're imagining the Rockville Pike in Rockville, having a bike path would be so difficult because of all of the access points. Yeah. So my other question was, in these new developments, I'm thinking of the one with the Whole Foods. Do you have any data on whether there's a lot of crashes within that area?
You mean the Whole Foods in Riverdale Park?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I guess we can, Michael, you think we can take a look and follow back up again to
Sure.
determine to determine what the impact. I don't know what the answer is.
So your concern is what's the crash level involving bicyclists and motorists in the vicinity of that Riverdale Park shopping center with the Whole Foods?
I think this is more thinking back to walking around there with little children, because it seems like such a great development. And it always frustrated me that the cars were still able to drive around in it because they get so little benefit and they have that huge parking lot up front. And so I'm curious that when we are having these new developments built, that they don't just block them off completely as pedestrian zones, which would just be amazing for parents. Because anytime I was there, I still had to be nervous because of all the little crossings, and the cars were just always back and forth trying to park just a little bit closer.
Oh, so your question is, what are reported pedestrian car crashes or pedestrian bike crashes within the shopping center development itself, not necessarily along Route 1 and Van Buren Streets? Okay. One thing I will get back with you on that if I can get that data. One of the things that is encouraging, though, the trolley trail has been completed through the Riverdale Park area. Now you can ride from Hydesville up to Berwyn Heights, mostly on trail. There's a short section in Lower College Park where you do get on low volume roadways, and that's actually going to be extended about a quarter-mile south along Rhode Island Avenue to connect with the Northwest Branch Trail. But I will check. I'll check and get back with you on that. Thanks.
Another encouraging thing, Annika, is that I am in no way versatile to be able to discuss this at all, is that we are in the process of updating the zoning code. Us, Prince George's County, we're in the process of updating the zoning code. And as a result, that will make some things more flexible. So when I'm imagining, because I wasn't at the commission at that time either, but I'm imagining that when the Whole Foods was built, they had to have a specific number of parking spaces based on the amount of development that was proposed to occur. So that is because our zoning code is much older. Now, with the new one that's coming on board, it will be more flexible in terms of parking spaces and connectivity and a bunch of different things. But I cannot say anything more than that, other than to send you a link to our page, because I can't speak on that other than knowing that it will update some of the older codes that we're responsible for adhering to.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was just always like a confusion about these new areas that are supposed to be walkable, and they're just like just barely falling short of their potential, I guess. Not even like the number of parking spots, right? Like having them all out front in those huge parking lots, I think is fine. But
And I know I've monopolized a lot of your time, so I don't know if let me put my email address back up, but maybe we can pass it to Crystal to do her presentation. But thank you all for inviting me to share, and really appreciate it.
Jesse, that's a great presentation. I would pay money to hear it. So keep up the good work over there, and thank you for your time and effort along there. With that, if there aren't any other questions for Jesse right now, let her get on with her evening. You're also, welcome to stay if you want to for the next 30 minutes. Crystal, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so engaged, Jesse. Well, she's gone, but I was so engaged in her conversation. I was like, wow, wait, I got to present. I'm like really caught up into it. So thank you again, Jesse, for coming over and sharing your knowledge with us. So thank you again. Again, for those who may have joined later, my name is Crystal Saunders Hancock, and I am taking the lead for the Master Plan of Transportation in the county. I just wanted to talk. It was more of just an update and not necessarily a lot of new information, unfortunately, but I can tell you where we are in the process. So I do want to thank everyone who was able to participate in our meetings in January. We had approximately 125 people come to the 3 of those meetings, and we had breakout sessions, and people who came seemed to enjoy the process. So thank you for coming. If you would like to see our presentation or would like to join us for project updates, I can go ahead and put the link in the chat about our project just a little bit. Where we are now is, I assume, is everyone familiar with the Master Plan of Transportation? Okay, I didn't want to assume that everybody knew what it was. So thank you all very much. And we are actually in a process of getting ready for our existing conditions report. So the information that we received from the public meetings, we're using that along with some other background data, and we're working with several agencies around the region to be able to develop an existing conditions report. And in that existing conditions report, it's just going to document what all the information that we know to date about transportation in Prince George's County. And then based on that, I think from the meetings that we held in January, we did request anyone who was interested in doing a little more work with us, which we greatly appreciate. We have an expression of interest, and I can go ahead and drop that in the chat if anyone is interested in learning about helping us out with what we're doing. So Yuri has already filled out an application to be a part of our interest groups that will look at some more information based on the existing conditions report. So we are very much in the process. That is still open. The survey is still open until the end of the week, which is March 11th at 11:59 p.m. But quietly, if someone says, "Hey, I forgot to do my application," if you send me an email, I'd be more than happy to try to hook you up and put you in, see how that works too. So I'll drop my information again also in the chat. So that's where we are in terms of that. So I did have a couple of questions that we weren't able to get to in the last meeting, that if we have some time and everyone is still comfortable, if not, we can figure out how to, we can send an email out and get some comments back from you. In our last meeting, we just wanted to talk a little bit about, get some more feedback from you in terms of like, what are some of the biggest impediments to building new bicycle and pedestrian facilities? I think some of the information that we've heard today in terms of could be helpful. Hi. Some of that learning, listening to that conversation earlier today could be helpful. I think, Annika, the question you asked about how can we get additional bike and ped facilities on state roadways is really helpful. That, you know, I think that's one of the comments that we can go ahead and put in. I'm not sure if anyone else has any other comments.
Crystal, could you repeat the question again?
What are the biggest impediments to building new bicycle and pedestrian facilities? And I think what you mentioned is sometimes between state and local government, you can get caught up with a lot of the red tape, which could be kind of challenging and discouraging, and not knowing who to talk to and what to say. Like, because I talk so much and I ask so many questions that that's what I do. They're sick of me, but I always ask questions. So,
Annika, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if it's relevant right now. I'll wait till later.
Okay.
Will we just say kind of the red tape between the two is one of the challenges? I would say.
I would. Oh.
Yuri?
I would add also the shortage of staffing. I know the county doesn't have enough staff, and I spoke at the budget hearing that we need to have allocated positions so we can actually leverage some of those funds available elsewhere too. And that's, and also the Central Avenue Connecting Trail. I mean, that's just something that when I was buying this house here, I was kind of looking forward to that. That sounded like that's going to be built any day now, and it's been 3 years and it hasn't even broke ground yet. And like, I don't understand what's going on with that, but my understanding it's just, again, shortage of staffing on the front end of it. And that's I think that's even a bigger impediment than access to state people, because if we have more staff, we have more people from the county to put ourselves on a state people's radar.
Okay, those are great. Hey, I'm here for more staff instead of all of us doing double duty. Definitely, I'm in favor of that. So, okay, perfect. I think that's perfect. The other question that we had is, what else are you, ATAG, working on that we should know about? Are there any other things that you may know from organizations you've been involved in that we should know about to make sure that we're sort of in the know about everything that's happening? Come on, guys. I don't know everything.
It's probably mostly a question for Michael, but I've been in close contact with WABA, and they're working on a lot of things, mostly through their trail coalition. I mean, I'm not going to rehash their newsletter, but that's sort of what I've kind of been trying to support and get involved.
And Central Avenue Trail Connector.
Yes, that's a very big sore point. It's a very, very big sore point. That's in fact how I originally joined ATAG group, is just really trying to figure out, where that project is.
Anything else that I'm missing? Elliot?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to go along with Central Avenue, I think the Maryland 704 project is something that I certainly care about, both professionally with East Coast Greenway Alliance, but also personally as someone who wants to be able to ride the WBN trail.
Thank you, Elliot.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm sorry because I'm talking and trying to write and do something in the chat. So I'm doing all kind of stuff. So it's cool. That's why we need more staff, Yuri.
One more thing to mention. I believe Johannes was here last meeting, and he mentioned the whole East Capitol kind of development and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how in sync is that with our Central Avenue Connecting Trail? Because do we have enough collaboration between the district and the county to make sure that our residents can use their network and their residents can use our network of trails? And it did not sound like they were collaborating enough. It sounded like that's just going to be, here's our borderline and that's about it. So I don't know if that's accurate understanding from my part, but that's another thing that I would like to see, you know, us being a little bit more involved in is connecting with the district.
So connecting the region, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, connecting the region, really, yes, correct. But district has a lot of miles of trails I'd like to access.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, Annika.
Yeah, I guess just as a random homeowner not connected to any group, the thing that always felt so difficult to me is it feels like there's so much follow-up work you have to do to like raise any issue. And it's like if you don't keep going at it like a full-time job, it just drops.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't know what could be done to help with that, because for me it was like that last mile thing where my house was so close to all of these trails, and it was
Right.
so scary to get to them, because I think I was like half a mile from the Northwest Branch Trail around College Park, which is amazing. It's a great trail, but getting to it is so hard.
Yep.
Annika, what are you mentioned your concerns when walking at Cool Spring and Adelphi and trying to get to the campus without using your car. And then you did mention about the University Boulevard corridor. So getting to the Northwest Branch Trail, if you did ride your bike or attempt to ride your bike, what would be your biggest concerns?
We have a lot of people shortcutting through Cool Spring Road, and they drive like crazy. I've seen 3 different cars crash into trees along like the little 3 stretch of houses that I live at. So it's just knowing that people are speeding and possibly driving drunk around there.
Okay.
Like I would maybe risk it by myself, but definitely not with kids.
Thanks. That's good to know. So we can share that with our colleagues with the county Department of Transportation.
And I know that's a hard road because it's kind of weird and there's no real place to put a shoulder. Although I feel like a year ago I went to some virtual meeting about it, and it's kind of that same thing. I have no idea what happened to it, but it doesn't seem like a sidewalk is coming.
Well, as staff people, I can say that often I don't think we would have, well, certainly as a bicycle pedestrian person, I wouldn't have my job if there weren't concerns from the public about getting things done. And I've worked around the country and would always say that there, in every place that I've been able to see, there've been gray-haired men that have just pushed, they're retired and they're interested. And then sometimes you have people who are passionate about one particular area and they can stick with that for years. And then there are people that, can get involved with a short period of time and then other things take them away from it. But we do need all types of citizens, and we do appreciate the effort that you're making and other citizens to show up on their spare time and to give us that input that we need. I just wanted to give some feedback. We do appreciate the effort, and I know as staff, we get frustrated with how long things can take to get done. That should be seemingly easy as well. But stick with it as long as you can, and I think you have our contact information, don't you?
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. I just put my contact information in the chat. If you have any questions, I'm looking at the chat now.
Add mine.
I mean, I agree. I mean, it's not, some things on our web pages are not as straightforward as I'd like them to be. But we have a process. I'm trying to turn the ship, but I'm doing what I can. again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to reach out to Michael or myself. And if you don't hear from me, please send me another email because, you know, I get tons of emails. So, yeah.
Yearly.
Mhm.
So just wanted to reflect also what Annika said about that it feels like you have to follow up and follow up and follow up. Has been also my experience with the county. I at some point I considered like a cork board where I can like all of my loose ends tape there, but instead I'm just doing it in OneNote virtually. I pretty much know half of the Maryland Department of Transportation emails, including Peter Campanavos. I'm not butchering his last name badly right now, but the point is that you have to keep at it. But the other thing I think we have to remember, and since I'm not a county employee, I can actually speak a little more freely than county employees, but we need to remember that Michael and Krista are technical experts. They're the planners. They're not the implementers. The implementers are the ones who are going to build it, which is Department of Public Works and Transportation. And they need to be funded, which is in my case, Julian Ivey, Angela also Brooks, and the 2 county members at large. And if I don't keep shooting emails to Ivy's office, who I know is a big proponent of biking, and she's the one who got that Public Works, bring the truck and overnight paint that strip, which I know is not a big deal in Hyattsville area where you are, Annika, but it's a big deal in our area because we had a car crash into a townhouse. And if there wasn't a fence, they would literally been through the house. They were going that fast on this road. The next day, the Public Works came and painted that thing, and it didn't work for a few months, and then people got used to it and started working. So I just encourage you to go also above and beyond this group and actually put emails to people with the purse and people with the tools to implement, because Michael and Crystal, we can talk good stuff here and kind of ideas, and but not implementation. And then Crystal also, Annika mentioned the car crashes. That reminded me of my other engagement that's been, I need to pick up on that, but I've been trying to engage District 3 Police Station on just a little bit more road enforcement. Ironically, I myself been in a brake check situation this weekend where I failed to respond to brake check and rear-ended a car. Turned out to be a wife of a police officer. I don't know if it was a PG police officer or not a police officer, but that person passed me in the shoulder, cut in front of me, and then decided to indicate that they were not happy that I was in front of them and brake checked me. And I had Ukraine on my mind and not someone's road rage, and I rear-ended them. So we'll find out how much that's going to cost to whose insurance. But the point is that I've been trying to work real hard and engage with District 3 police stations to make sure the police cars are not just responding to my fender bender, but also out there showing themselves that they're out there. And then people are reminded, because as you know, automated enforcement is not really wide in our county. And I'm frankly not a huge fan of automated enforcement. I think it penalizes poor people, and it really doesn't make any difference for those guys with electronic shade in their license plate who drive like there's no tomorrow. But actual police enforcement should really be on the road. And that's what I've been as a sort of a member of this community of people in the county who are like really trying to make a difference. Is I've been going multiple times to the District 3 station. I went to the Forestville the state trooper station as well, and asked them a lot of questions about just sort of how can we as residents support you guys to be out there on the road. And I'm not trying to turn our county a police state, but I am trying to make sure that our officers feel appreciated, but also that our officers know that there are residents who also want to see enforcement on the road, not just that enforcement is all bad.
Right. I get it. That's a great point. That is yeah. I don't have an answer. Of course, I don't have an answer for it, but definitely as we think through, we're always, as well, you may or may not know, but our referrals are constantly saying, with with approval from, like you mentioned, DPI and DPW&T, but I think even with the enhancement of a police presence along roadway corridors could be helpful with the concerns of speeding and safety enforcement. So yeah, I thank you. You see, I am definitely taking notes over here. So that does make sense. So, okay. All right. Okay.
let's see, for time has gone by pretty quickly.
I think Annika has one more question. Do we have one more question?
One more, yeah. So I know we're talking a lot about how much follow-up there has to be and how much work you have to put in. And I know there's rules for like the new developments that come in, but is there any way to kind of prioritize the existing sidewalk infrastructure? Because if we're relying on people showing up at these meetings or marking them on that web map, which is really always difficult to use somehow, especially on a phone, I feel like you're going to miss a lot of areas that desperately need new sidewalks, just because they aren't marking it. And I guess that's kind of where that traffic crash map is supposed to come in. But I'm thinking of, so somewhere along the Northwest Branch Trail, I was like riding with my kids and we wanted to get to a playground that was sort of nearby. I don't remember exactly which city, and it's like a smaller one, a little couple miles out of College Park. And the sidewalk was just right next to the road, like maybe 2 or 3 feet wide, just terrifying, just walking there with a 2-year-old to a playground. And so I guess my question is if there's any effort or way to make sure that those areas don't get ignored, because I'm skeptical that anyone would like show up to a meeting in English and be like, hey, we really need to fix our sidewalk.
So
but they
it's
really
funny.
need a new sidewalk. That's
Yeah,
farther
it's
from the
funny.
road.
I was having I don't mean to cut you off, but I was having a conversation with park staff today who mentioned the exact same thing, that, hey, we have all of these great facilities and that were built prior to us realizing that we need sidewalks and bike lanes. And now they're going back trying to think through how that can be implemented on park property. So that is, again, as Yuri mentioned, we are thinking about things. It's just a matter of funding to be able to implement them. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I get what you mean, that existing communities, not necessarily not new ones, but existing communities need retrofits also to be able to encourage bicycle and sidewalk safety options for for them. So yeah, I totally, I get it. For sure.
And yeah, especially if we can like focus on like getting neighborhoods to parks, because that's always so scary with kids, and then
Yes.
having to put them in the car turns into a thing where you just don't end up doing it.
Right. Especially on a nice day, everybody's trying to get out and get some air, get some steps. We've been in for 2 years, so just trying to figure out ways to do different things. I totally get it. I get it.
Elliot, I see your hand.
More of a question / comment, because I know I spent I'm from DC, but I spent most of the last decade in Georgia working on sort of bike ped issues. And in Georgia, if a sidewalk is along a state controlled highway, state right of way, it's actually the municipality that's in charge of either building or maintaining the sidewalk. And I wasn't sure in Maryland if, again, some of these larger roads we're talking about probably are state DOT roads. And I wasn't sure if if a sidewalk's in an incorporated municipality, say College Park, or I sort of forget in Prince George's County what's a municipality and what's a CDP or what have you. But are cities responsible for maintaining sidewalks, building sidewalks? Where does the county step in? This might be a longer conversation, but it's certainly relevant to what I think Annika was saying, which is that you've got all these and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but you've got all these overlapping responsible bodies. And it's like the people that just want to get to the park don't actually care whose responsibility is. They just want to get to the park without getting run over. And so, so I'm curious about that and how that plays out. And certainly clarification with any kind of long range transportation plan on who's responsible for what is always helpful.
Elliot, you're absolutely correct. And Michael, I'll let you go ahead. But as you know, nothing is ever as easy as just identifying one person for one area. I'll leave it at that. Michael, you can go ahead. You're the expert on it, but.
Elliot, that's actually somewhat easy to answer, but you may not like the answer. There's a state law, actually in the books, that the state will fund sidewalks, they will construct sidewalks and bike paths, but the state is not responsible for the maintenance. The maintenance is the responsibility of the political jurisdiction that the sidewalk or the bike path is located on. There is one exception, and that is if a sidewalk has deteriorated to such a degree that repair is not feasible. If there are funds available, the state will pay to reconstruct that sidewalk.
Okay, got it. And so localities like the city of College Park, they could theoretically put in their own applications for federal funds, obviously TA funds, things like that, to build out sidewalk, even if it's along an MDOT route, because they are technically the responsible, or they could go through MDOT to build, or if they wanted to take a sidewalk and build a multi-use path instead, they'd have to work through MDOT, but theoretically they could do that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
if it's on a state highway, then you definitely need to have the concurrence of
Right.
state highway administration.
Gotcha. All right, that helps clear things up a little bit for me. Thank you.
But then there's also county roads and local municipality
Right.
roads. Which
Which is different.
That's
Yeah,
what
for sure.
that's why I'm just like, it varies. It varies.
Well, I see we've arrived at 8:30. Are there any burning questions?
I'm sorry, I have not looked at the chat. So if someone sent a chat, sent a note, I will go back through and look at the comments, just because I was talking so much. So
Is there any way to fast track those bollards along the sides of roads? They added those in MacArthur Boulevard in Potomac last year. Even though it's like a narrow shoulder that, had kind of a bike marked on it, but it was still terrifying. But those made such a huge difference. Like the next day, you just saw 12-year-olds going for a walk on that road, where I'm sure their parents would not have let them go before. And it seems like an affordable option to just quickly make bike paths safer.
Theoretically, yes. Montgomery County, I live in Silver Spring, and the county, this was kind of like an experiment. They recently did a road diet on a roadway nearby Plum Orchard Drive, and they reduced the roadway from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane, and then created a bike lane with markings and a series of bollards. The flexible ones that won't injure your car or cyclists if you run into them. Have I seen more bicyclists using them than before? It's such a short section, and I'm not too sure. But yeah, theoretically, that is possible, and it is inexpensive.
but that is also a DPW&T or SHA. I mean, someone other than the planning department. I mean, we could make, say we want a meeting, this is kind of what we heard, but we are not implementers. We come up with the great ideas.
Maybe just to wrap up all this subjects and points of these jurisdictions, maybe it's a good thing to just put out because it took me a while to find out Peter, for example, and some other people in the MDOT. And maybe if we can sort of save that trouble to other, city residents and put out the correct focal points for the correct district, for the correct SHA, for the correct DPWT, some kind of information so that we can directly, kind of go and sort of bombard the implementers with our requests rather than having, kind of this meeting as a venue for very specific elements discussed.
Yeah, I know we mentioned Peter a lot, but Peter probably is not the right person to be identified on that list of staffing, like sort of a go-to staffing for each agency.
Yeah, actually, we have something available on the ATAG website, which should have appeared at the bottom of your of the agenda that was sent out. If you go to the website, God, I can't think of what we called it. Additional information, something like that. We've listed the contact information for the county, for the state, and for the Department of Park and Recreation, either a website or a phone number to call for specific concerns. And with the state, there's something called customer care, the customer care service, something like this. There's a website that you type in information. There's all these drop-down boxes, and they will respond to you and get back. One thing that was real interesting in Rockville, when I was with the state, the chair was looking at trying to do something for Rockville Pike. And we have these bicycles may use full lane signs, R4-11s. And so I said, well, Nancy, why don't you go ahead and put in a request to SHA? And she was kind of like reluctant. And I said, go ahead. And she did. And, within a couple of months, they had bicycles may use full lane signs along the entire stretch of Rockville, of 355 within the Rockville city limits.
Here it is. I'll put in the chat. There is something under useful information. There are Prince George's County maintenance requests, Maryland State Highway Administration service requests, educational and safety. So that is, I just included that link in there under useful information. So.
Crystal, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
I remember when those signs came up, Michael, on 355, and I was very excited at the time because I was 20 and riding my bike on 355. But I think now that I have kids, it's like a whole different story. And I'm like, well, we're not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Not until they get older, right?
And then you got to think hard. Mm-hmm.
But I've ridden on Rockville Pike a few times, and it's interesting. And I found the same in Ocean City on their combined bus bike lane, that the cars tend to move in platoons. So you have one moment, vehicles, I ride the center of the lane and the vehicles, just change lanes to pass me. And so half the time you've got cars going by, and then the other half, you've got the whole lane to yourself. And who would have thunk that?
Yeah. That one's actually like oddly slow moving, so it's not as scary. Another one that I found was less scary than I thought it would be is 193. Just the entire stretch of it. I used to ride that all the way from, I think, in Wheaton area up to College Park. Because it has such a big shoulder and so many lanes, it was actually not too bad because you didn't have to deal with too much traffic, except at those intersections where I think the cars would turn left into the neighborhood roads. I think that was in Jesse's presentation, probably. The one time I've gotten hit on a bicycle was a neighborhood access road, somebody turning left.
Oh, one of those intersection crashes.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you all for sharing, and feel free to contact us if there are any follow-up questions, and in case we don't get back to you, nudge us as well. I appreciate your time, your effort, and your questions and your interest. And with that, we'll conclude for the evening. And thank you, Crystal. Again.
Thank you guys for coming out and sharing this evening with us and your great ideas. So, all righty. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay. See you in June.
Thank you. Do you have the date, Michael, for June?
It's
That's okay. Don't worry.
It'll be the first Monday in June.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you had the date. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I can look at my calendar, but it's the first Monday in June.
Okay.
It's the first Monday for March.
Oh, that's the week of June 6th. It's the week of June 6th.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't want to say that. And it's the second Monday in September because Labor Day is the first Monday.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Okay. Good
Thank
night.
you again, Yuri, for all your help.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your thinking and work on this. Appreciate you.
Have a great evening. Bye-bye.